Hey everybody. So we have another trade to talk about. After Edmonton made the Petrovic deal, they made another trade a few hours later. So if this trade, I think, is far worse for the Oilers than the Petrovic deal. At least with adding Alexander Petrovic to the Oilers lineup, I at least saw some potential upside there. It wasn't a great groundbreaking trade that's going to drastically change the team, but there's potential upside there. With this deal, I don't see the upside at all. I don't understand how this in any way makes the Edmonton Oilers a better hockey team. So, let's get into it here. The Oilers traded Drake Caggiula and Jason Garrison to the Chicago Blackhawks in exchange for Brandon Manning and Robin Norell. Yeah, I don't get this at all. Obviously, Edmonton is looking for defense. They're really depleted on the back end with injuries. They have got to get some defensemen in there who can play. But look what they're giving up and look what they're getting in return. So obviously, the guy I assume that they really wanted here was Brandon Manning. Why? You just traded for Alex Petrovic, who is a bottom pair defenseman. Now you're trading for another bottom pair defenseman in Brandon Manning. Brandon Manning is 28 years old. He has 3 points in 27 games with the Blackhawks this year. He's been getting healthy scratched at times. They give up Drake Caggiula, who's a 24-year-old forward who has 11 points in 29 games this year. 7 goals as a bottom 6 forward. Caggiula has some value. Now, he's not, an elite scorer or anything, but there's talent there. If you saw Drake Caggiula play at North Dakota, especially that year that they won the national championship, Drake Caggiula has some talent. That kid can play. He lit it up at the college hockey level. Now, obviously, there's a huge difference between NCAA and the NHL. And Caggiula hasn't really shined at the NHL level the way he did in college. However, there's absolute talent there, and there's the ability for some strong secondary scoring. Caggiula is a guy who can give you, 10 to 15 goals a year as a third-line player. Why is Edmonton giving that up for a defenseman who is playing in the Swedish league right now and a garbage bottom pair defenseman who really belongs as a 7? And they give up Jason Garrison, who's been healthy scratch for most of this season. He's only played 17 games, and he has 1 point. He's 34 years old. Garrison is on his way out of the NHL. This is probably his last year in the NHL. So giving him up isn't a big deal. But you lose Drake Caggiula, who is actually a bottom 6 talented player who can give you secondary scoring, and all you get in return is Brandon Manning and some guy who I had never even heard of before today. I had to look him up because I had no clue who he was. He's a Swedish defenseman. He's 23 years old. He's playing currently in the Swedish league, the SHL. He has 3 points in 28 games in the SHL this year. Is that a guy who's going to help you right now? Absolutely not. Is this a guy who's ever going to make it in the NHL? It doesn't look like it. He's 23 and he's currently playing in the Swedish league. And he was with Chicago, who has a pretty lousy defense when you look at their roster. Chicago's defense is not good. If he couldn't crack that roster, and he's not even playing in the AHL, he's on loan back to the Swedish league. Is Robin Norell ever going to suit up for the Edmonton Oilers? Probably not. So you traded Jason Garrison and Drake Caggiula basically for Brandon Manning. Are you kidding me? Christ, you could have probably got Brandon Manning for a 6th-round draft pick. If they traded Garrison for Manning 1-for-1, I'd be fine with that. Because Manning's younger, he's tougher, and he's played more games this year. He looks more like of an NHL player than Jason Garrison is at this point. But you lose Drake Caggiula for Brandon Manning? Are you kidding me? This is an idiotic trade for the Oilers. I don't see how this makes them better in any way. I know they need defensemen, but you gave up a ton for Brandon freaking Manning. Not to mention the whole Manning versus McDavid fiasco. Brandon Manning broke Connor McDavid's collarbone McDavid's rookie year when Manning was in Philadelphia. You better hope that Chiarelli went to McDavid and made sure that it was okay to bring this guy in, because there's history there between those two. If Chiarelli made this deal and brought in Brandon Manning without consulting Connor McDavid, Chiarelli should be fired on the spot. I mean, Chiarelli should be fired already, but he should be fired on the spot if he didn't consult Connor McDavid before making this deal. Because McDavid and Manning, there's history there. So, I mean, at the very least, I hope Chiarelli went to Connor McDavid and made sure it was okay and he didn't have a problem with them bringing in Brandon Manning. But that set aside, this trade at face value just itself, I don't see... I mean, this is a huge win for the Blackhawks. I know I'm talking about this almost from an Oilers perspective. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just... The Oilers are the active team right now making these deals, and they're not getting better. This trade doesn't make the Oilers better. If I'm Chicago, this... Great job, Stan Bowman. This is a great deal. Drake Caggiula can slide in on Chicago's third line and produce. He can score 15 goals as a third liner in the NHL. Garrison does... I mean, Manning was healthy, scratched at points anyway. They have other defensemen. Garrison basically becomes your 8th defenseman. Maybe he even gets waived to the AHL. I don't think Garrison was a big part of this deal. Drake Caggiula was. 24 years old, very good college hockey player. Not lighting it up at the NHL level, but a solid bottom 6 secondary scorer. And all Edmonton gets out of it is Brandon Manning. This is a big-time win for the Chicago Blackhawks. Chiarelli took a huge L on this trade. He gave up way too much to add a bottom-pair defenseman to the lineup. At least with the Petrovic deal, yes, they lose the pick, but losing Wideman wasn't a big deal, and there's upside there with Alex Petrovic. There's not that... Brandon Manning does not have that same upside. Brandon Manning is not going to get any points. He's not going to play offensively for you. He's a bottom pair, better suited as a 7th defenseman who fights and hits. That's it. That's what he is, and that's all he's ever going to be. Petrovic has better upside. I didn't mind that deal. I hate that this deal is a big L for the Oilers. It's a definite win for Chicago, who just added Drake Caggiula to their lineup, who, again, isn't going to hugely change anything, but he's a solid secondary scorer. So that's pretty much what I've got on that. I am not a fan of this deal at all from the Edmonton Oilers perspective. If you're Chicago, you just fleeced Peter Chiarelli. Chiarelli loses another trade for the Oilers. How long before this moron gets fired? He should have been fired after last season. He should have been fired before that. But how long before this idiot gets fired? Chiarelli's the worst GM in the NHL, I think. So, with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media, check out offthewallhockey.com. All those links are down in the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.